The tray had held a large bowl of water and cloth. Edro tried to feed you some of the water with difficulty, but the bowl was large and there was only so much you could swallow while being unconscious. He resolved to use the water for its intended purpose, to clean the blood off you. Edro's hand trembled as he swiped the damp cloth over your face. Tears flowed freely, but he attempted to cage his sobs to little avail. The cream rag bled red before he'd even properly cleaned your arms. You wince every so often, barely a movement at all, and confined to a slight press of your eyes. Unnoticeable had Edro not been monitoring your face every so often, awaiting your lovely eyes to open and prove that you would love. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, when his turmoil became too much to bear. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I should have let the knife hit me. I don't know why I didn't. I'm sorry, Pebble, I'm so sorry." His tears dripped onto your skin, mixing with your blood and dripping to the ground, tinted pink. He held you close as he cried, hating that you were cool to the touch, and willing his warmth onto you. "E, my love?" Edro gasped, pulling back to see your eyes peeking through tired slits. Why are you crying?" A waterfall of guilt and shame erupted from Edro's eyes. "I'm sorry," he said for the 100th time. "I'm so sorry." "Oh, my E," you hushed faintly. "There was no winning that situation. I know it's not something you want to hear, but I'm grateful it was me and not you. I don't have the strength. You do." You bring your trembling hand to his face and try to smile faintly. "Don't cry. Katsuki will come for us." Edro encompassed your hand in his and closed his eyes to focus on your touch. He sniffled. "You're the one who's hurt, but you're comforting me." There was no response. The hand in his grasp had gone limp once again. His fingers itched to your pulse, feeling his own heart thud with worry. You had only fallen unconscious again, having used much of your strength to reassure him. Edro brought you back to his chest, believing he could encircle you and be the shield he was meant to. If only there was a way to give his quirk to you and keep you safe. The woman walked in hours later, when hunger began to gnaw inside Edro's stomach, and fatigue plagued his mind and eyes. Despite the exhaustion, however, once the taps of her feet could be heard, Edro pulled you closer to him instinctively. Not that that mattered much, when the woman just stared impassively and clicked the button on her remote. Edro was yanked away from you. Your body thumped onto the ground. He struggled against the impossible magnetic force, gritting his teeth with effort and shouting, "Please, that's enough! You've done enough!" The woman glanced at him. "It doesn't feel like enough to me." Her gaze drifted back to you. "I thought they'd be awake by now, but no matter. I will just have to wake them." She reached for your wrist, intending to pull you back to your cell, but as she leaned down, you lashed out. She yelled in outrage and pain, but you didn't have time to watch the blood leak to her clothes from where you'd stabbed her through her shoulder. You leaped for the remote that she dropped and clicked Edro free. Edro jumped down, poised to stampede her, but she was quick. Before Eijirou could reach her, she'd slammed her fist down to you. A fist that held a syringe. You gasped as the needle pierced your skin, and remained stuck even after Edro had tackled her to the ground. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" She sneered up at Edro, tilting her head to where you were rising and slowly pulling the deep needle out. Edro's heart dropped. "What was that?" he demanded, gripping onto her with his hardened claws. What the fuck was that? Let me go, behave, and maybe I'll save their life, she ordered, knowing that despite her lowered stance, she had the upper hand. The dizziness that strikes you is overwhelming, but you shake your head. Don't. We'll figure it out. We'll get help once we're out. They might not have so much time, the woman said patiently, like talking to a child who couldn't comprehend the situation before him. Edro glanced between you and her, but the conflict swelling in red did not last long. He retreated reluctantly, allowing the woman to look at her wound with disgust. What the fuck did you stab me with? My skin, Edro grunted. For the first time, the woman noticed the red, raw patch missing from Edro's skin. Though you feel yourself fading, you look upon Edro's wound forlorn. He'd put himself through pain to save them, but nothing had come of it. She rose and dusted herself off as she exited the cell. Well, wasn't that a waste of? The ceiling collapsed abruptly in a wave of light. Debris fell onto the woman, along with the furious demon that was Katsuki, who took only a second to look at the villain before he grabbed her around her neck and dragged her harshly from the rubble around her. Katsuki threw her into the bars, enforcing it with an explosion and knocking her out instantly. He had bounced on her, as menacing and volatile as lava running down a volcano. But you called in relief, merely a breath of his name. Katsuki! Katsuki whipped around, his shoulder lowering slightly as he saw his partners still alive. Edro rushed to your side, his arms coming around you to support you. Are you okay? How are you feeling? Your eyelids droop. I feel okay, you say slowly. Just really tired. You struggle to keep yourself awake, but know if you pass out now, Edro would panic, and they weren't sure what had been in that syringe. Katsuki approached, his face slack, but his eyes burning with 100 different emotions. At first you didn't understand why he was looking at you like that, but then you realized. The cuts. I'm okay, you say quietly. It's okay. Katsuki, that woman gave them something. This. Eijirou brandished the syringe, which still had a little of the light, violet substance within. Katsuki shook his head, likely to clear it, and he approached your other side. It's okay, that's her quirk. It's a sleeping drug. You smiled drowsily at Katsuki. You're late. Eijirou's breakfast is making you slow? Katsuki's eyes misted. Sorry, I'm late. I'll make breakfast for the week. Fuck it, the whole month. You allow your eyes to close, leaning against Edro. Sounds like a plan. You woke up in the hospital, pleasantly ecstatic not to be in a dungeon, however unpleasantly disappointed that there was only hospital food available. Once the doctors had had their time to heal you and Edro, whose arm bloomed with fresh skin already while you were still raw under the bandages, Katsuki brought in the security footage to show you what had happened. As it turned out, the woman, who they found out was named Dinara Sato, half Russian, half Japanese, had family who had been smuggling different drugs across the border for years. Dominic was just one bee in the hive of the operation. It wasn't in their nature to make themselves known. Without Dinara's actions, they may not have found the rest. Dinara had taken advantage of Edro and your tendency to leave reports to the last minute. They had ordered pizza to nibble on while they were working, and Dinara had intercepted the delivery man to dress the pizza with her drug. Edro and you had fallen asleep not long after, and been dragged away by her underlings, or perhaps paid help. You scrunch your nose as you watch them toss you and Edro into the van, and pout. Guess no more late-night snacks, huh, E? Edro had barely spent a minute without holding your hand or touching some part of you. At present, he laid on the small hospital bed beside you. The bed was not big enough to fit Katsuki as well, so he accepted the hand on your free side, while holding the tablet up for both of you to view. Edro smiled faintly. Guess not. He tried not to frown, knowing that what had happened would have a lasting effect, and you had to be patient for him to move past it. You placed your head on his shoulder, hoping to comfort him. Or you can finish your reports on time, Katsuki says, as lightly as he could manage. Impossible. You chuckle and squeeze his hand. The agency had already begun to implement a food screening policy, and Hatsumi was already working on one of her babies to help. You were thankful that after surgery, healing, a blood transfusion, and more healing and treatment, that the hospital sent you home with a demand to return for checkups. You wasted no time in crawling into bed and letting the exhaustion of the past few days and all the quirk healing take over and knock you out. Edro and Katsuki naturally followed you to bed, though neither seemed too inclined to sleep. Edro had taken to tracing the scars on your arms, his eyes far as though he was reliving the nightmare of each cut being placed. Katsuki watched, feeling both the push to say something to Edro, who had barely spoken to him, and the pull to keep quiet, uncharacteristically. But Katsuki was not one to shy away, and could not suppress, nor allow Edro to suppress, whatever emotions were holding them back. They would have to move forward from this, with all their feelings exposed, or down the road a stray nail may puncture a tire and lead them to crash. I'm sorry, Katsuki blurts out. I'm sorry about what happened. Edro's eyes flick up, surprised, and he shakes his head as though confused. Katsuki, it's not your fault. You've been distant since you got back, Katsuki says, because it's true, and because if Edro blamed him or was angry, Katsuki wanted him to release that anger on him. To hold on to that feeling would be detrimental to the three of them. Edro lowered his eyes back to you, almost contemplative. You know, when I chose to be a hero, I was so prepared for the danger for myself. I knew with my thick skin I could handle anything coming my way. But I never thought about my loved ones and how they would be affected. That my loved ones would be heroes and could get hurt as well. Would you have still wanted to become a hero if you knew how things would turn out? Katsuki stared at him, stunned by his question, by its insinuation. How could Katsuki answer that? Edro blinked, seeming to realize what he'd just asked Katsuki, and shook his head. Sorry, it was just a silly question. I'm going to get some sleep, okay? You should too. He wraps his arms around you, closing his eyes. Though he didn't seem as though he genuinely wanted to sleep, Eijirou had fallen asleep quickly, the events of the past few days having caught up with him. However, Katsuki could not sleep. He stared at you and Eijirou long into the night, tossing with his guilt and Eijirou's question that he could not answer. From the moment Katsuki had realized your disappearances were the workings of a villain, he had been in turmoil, tortured in a way he would not dare compare with yours and Eijirou's, but had suffered all the same. He suffered still, as he faced the visual representation of his inadequacy, the scars both apparent and not, shouting at his eyes to not look away and be aware of what he caused. Katsuki had stayed staring long enough to catch the first sights of Eijirou's nightmare, feeling his guilt compound and shroud his heart, crushing it from all sides. Should he reach out? Was he allowed to? He did not have to contemplate that long. Surprisingly, you woke to Eijirou shifting, rising only enough to slip your hands around his head and bring him to your chest. You stroked his hair and began to sing. Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me know what love feels like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, please stay true. In other words, I love you. Slowly, Edro calmed and hopefully fell into a dreamless slumber. You turned around as though feeling Katsuki's stare and smiled. How could you still smile so brightly after what he put you through? I texted Edro's mother earlier. I knew he'd start getting nightmares again, so I thought we'd need something a bit more effective this time around. They said that singing always put him right back to sleep. Seems to work. Katsuki acknowledged. You glance at him again, sobering. Shouldn't you be sleeping too? Shoto mentioned that you haven't slept since we were taken. Half enough has a big mouth, Katsuki said, but not nearly as much irritation he'd usually speak with. Still, he seemed reluctant to sleep, so you urged. Katsuki, please? Come sleep. Katsuki's eyes narrowed on you. Why do you seem so unaffected by all this? You chuckle. Oh, come on, Katsuki. A few scrapes? This is my every other Thursday. Actually, pretend to think for a moment. Remember 2 weeks ago when that kid stabbed me with water? This is better than every Thursday. Katsuki's gaze softened. You're an idiot. And I don't believe that. You meet his gaze, your smile soft and reassuring. I had the easy part, Katsuki. Getting hurt is my everyday. I can deal with a few scrapes. But your smile is harder to hold as you remember his screams overpowering yours. How he begged and pleaded, and you wished he'd become temporarily blind so he would not be tortured too. Had the hard part, you say. Simple words that did not begin to cover the expanse of what Edro had gone through. He just asked me if I'd rethink becoming a hero, knowing how it would affect those around me, Katsuki admitted, the words that had plagued him splurting out into the open. You frowned. He doesn't mean anything by it, Katsuki. I know, but you stretch your hand to clasp his. Don't feel guilty for doing what you love. We all knew the risks when we became heroes. We knew we were going to get hurt. I knew. What happened could have easily happened with my own enemies, Katsuki. I have vengeful enemies that care about me too, you know. Not everything's about you. You try for lightness. And though you're sure it failed to bring up the mood, it does get Katsuki to relax a little further into the bed and lift a thin layer of guilt that had clung to him. I'll talk to Edro, you assure him, as you thread your fingers through Edro's hair. I'm just glad that the universe gave him this quirk. I wouldn't have survived hearing him in pain. You're the only idiot I know who'd be thankful to get hurt, he says, as he inches closer to you, taking solace at your side. You glance at him. Tell me you wouldn't be if you were in my place. I wish you had it too, Katsuki admitted. The memory of that infernal picture felt nearly fresh in his mind. How his stomach had turned with the first glance, and yet he could not pry his eyes away until the phone was physically pulled from his hand by Yuzuko. You sigh and say matter-of-factly, but we can't have everything. You kiss his forehead. The important thing is that we're safe now, right? Yeah. Katsuki breath. You're both safe, that's all that matters. It wasn't until the early parts of the morning, 4 o'clock, the time Katsuki's sleep always broke from habit, even when he had no intention to rise, that he saw how affected you were. He opened his eyes with resignation, contemplating whether to reattempt sleep or start an elaborate breakfast, but paused as he heard your quiet cries. It's okay. Please, stop crying. I'm okay. Promise. Tears slid down your cheeks as you faced whatever images lay in your nightmares. Katsuki reaches out for you, places a hand on you, and you jerk awake. Tears do not cease as you stare at him, choking on your cries. He waits for you to realize it was him you stared at, not the dank cells you'd been trapped in. You snap your head behind you, finding Edro sleeping as peacefully as he could, all things considered. Then you bring your fingers to your eyes, trying to find some semblance of control, even as sob after sob broke out. Katsuki pulled your hands away, and you look up, trembling. You don't have to be strong right now, Katsuki said softly. You crumble, collapsing into Katsuki's waiting arms and sobbing uncontrollably. He watched the whole time, Katsuki. I can still hear him screaming. Katsuki held you tightly. I know. I'm sorry. I know. You cried yourself to sleep in his arms, and Katsuki couldn't bring himself to sleep again. So he kept watch, as he would for the next couple nights, taking responsibility for the horrors he'd caused in his partners, and chasing away the night demons that plagued them.